Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video we're going to be breaking down some of the most underrated or sleeper OP champions, builds, and rune setups for patch 10.1. And I just thought I'd let you guys know that over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be giving away a bunch of codes for the new Freljord Silas skin, thanks to the League Partner Program over on my stream on Twitch, and then also on Discord. We're going to be live as this video goes up on Twitch, giving away some codes, then also starting our Climb to Masters on my main account. So if you're interested in checking either of those out, links will be down in the description below. So if we start things off here with a support pick, it's going to be Bard, and Bard himself is underrated right now. The build setup going around on him is underrated, and also the rune setup too. So pretty much everything to do with Bard right now in this patch is underrated. So first up there for the rune setup, Omnistone is doing great on him in this patch. Biofrost has been playing a lot of Bard in this patch. He's been spamming Omnistone, having pretty good success with it. Other Bard players have also been running it in this patch. He's actually got a decent pick rate on him at around like 10%. Is performing very well so far in 10.1. So if you were brave enough to run this keystone in previous patches, you probably would have had to deal with your team spam missing pinging you as you'd enter games, or just pinging your Omnistone keystone. But hopefully that should happen a lot less for you in the coming patches, because after the buffs this rune has received, it is actually pretty strong now on a few different champions. And then for this build path on Bard of Deadman's into Rapid Fire Cannon and usually Liandry's as your third item, lots of pros have been liking this build in this patch recently as well. With the Deadman's Rush there, it allows you to get around the map even quicker. It allows you to be a lot tankier too, and this is something that especially helps out like newer Bard players or less experienced Bard players, because having that extra armor, having that extra health allows you to play a lot more aggro. It allows you to make more mistakes, get chunked out a little bit more. You're not going to get bursted out right away if you do end up getting caught out. So it's actually really nice, especially if you're going up against like a heavy AD composition. If they have like an assassin jungler and an assassin mid lane, having the Deadmans there actually makes you surprisingly tanky. With the Rapid Fire Cannon giving you the extra attack speed, allows you to proc your passive a lot quicker. It allows you to proc your passive from a longer range, so a little bit better pick potential as well with this setup. And then for a third item, either Liandry's or Protobelt is a really good choice, just another damage item to allow you to carry harder with this build on Bard. So overall, this setup is a little bit more expensive for sure, but it's a really good snowbally setup. It does give you a lot more solo carry potential, and I feel like in solo queue, that should be your main goal. When you're playing support, you should not be trying to like allow your team to carry you. Like, you should be the carry, you should be the one looking to make plays and dealing damage. And with this build on Bard, like, you'd be surprised, you can even solo out the enemy AD carry once you get 2 or 3 items. So taking a look at, in my opinion, the most underrated top laner for 10.1 is by far Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is so strong at the moment if you know how to play her well in both the top lane and in the mid lane, but I'd say she's definitely more underrated up in the top lane. I've already seen this champion a couple times in my placement games being played up in the top lane, and every single game it's smash lane. It's just completely stomped the enemy top laner, and it's 1v9 the game. I just think if you can play a good Cassiopeia right now, the fact that her laning phase is so strong, the fact she scales so well into the mid to late game as well, like, there's no weaknesses to this champion really, which makes her such a great pick. She does especially well into any top laner who does not have a gap closer. You can just constantly look to harass them in the laning phase. Even top laners who do have gap closers, if you know how to play a good Cassiopeia and you throw down your W at the correct timings, you can get a Rylai's to help you kite out better. And if you can use your ultimate well, you do have really good kiting potential. You just need to be able to play Cassiopeia at a little bit higher level. But even then, I think right now, if you can play a decent Cassiopeia, you can have some really good success on her. So for a jungle pick in this patch, Shyvana is probably the most underrated jungler for 10.1, especially for the lower elo. She ended up getting a couple buffs in this patch, one to her passive, one to her E as well. She's now actually going to benefit from Cloud Dragon. I think that's one of the main reasons as to why like she wasn't performing very well in previous patches, because the new Cloud Dragon completely useless on her. Like, she didn't gain anything from that extra CDR from her ultimate. But in this patch now, what it's gonna do, the Cloud Dragon is now going to increase Shyvana's Fury gains by 10% for one Cloud Dragon, scaling up to 40%. So that's a lot better for Shyvana now in this patch. Her E is also going to be dealing more max health damage in 10.1, so that's also going to help her solo out those dragons faster. Now for build setup and rune setup on Shyvana, you got a couple different options in this patch. You can either go for the Dark Harvest and you can go for the AP setup. I think that's probably the better setup for the lower elos. It's just a lot easier to execute. It's you just have a clear win condition with this setup. You want to be getting to your ultimate, you want to be poking with your E. I just think it's a little bit simpler to execute than if you were to go for the AD Shyvana, but I think AD Shyvana is fine in this patch as well. If you're a Shyvana player, you can change it up depending on the game, depending on what your team needs. So if your team needs AD damage, you can go for the Blood Razor setup. You can go for the Conquer as well there with your rune choice, and that's a fine setup for this patch. But if your team needs AP, or if you just like playing AP Shyvana, it's also a great option for 10.1. Alright, so taking a look at a support or AD carry pick in this patch, Senna right now is performing much better with the Glacial Augment as her keystone rune. Now, this has been a setup that's been going around the past couple patches. Like, it's always been a pretty good rune on Senna, but it's not until these past few patches here that pretty much every single pro player now is running the Glacial Augment as the rune on Senna. Most solo queue players are still going Dark Harvest for AD carry Senna. Most support solo queue Senna players are still going Airy, so if you're still running that, I look to try out Glacial Augment if you haven't before. Every single pro right now in this patch is taking the Glacial Augment rune, and it's just overall a very strong rune for Senna. It's really good for a few different reasons. Your Q does apply on hit effects with Senna, so it allows you to just stick onto your opponent really nicely. With that sticking power, it's going to allow you to get a lot more souls throughout the laning phase as well. You're also going to be able to just chase down the opponents really good because you're going to run the approach velocity there, so whenever you end up slowing the opponent, you gain the bonus movement speed towards them. So once you do get ahead in the laning phase with this setup on Senna especially, it's really difficult for the enemies to do anything against you just because you do have a ton of sticking power with this setup. Now for Ezreal, even though he is still one of the weakest AD carries in this patch, he's got a little bit stronger in 10.1 because of the Omnistone changes. Omnistone is now performing best on him for this patch. Conquer's still not a bad option, but Omnistone is outperforming it now in 10.1, and if you haven't tried it out on Ezreal, then I would definitely recommend it. I think overall for this patch, if you are looking for elo, if your main goal is to climb, I would just stay away from Ezreal entirely because I just don't think he's a very good AD carry pick. But if you do play him, if you're an Ezreal main or if you're an Ezreal OTP, look to try out the Omnistone. It's a pretty solid rune on him. You do have the ability to consistently proc it throughout the laning phase. As long as you can hit your Qs at a consistent rate, then you are going to be benefiting a ton from this Omnistone rune. And then for a very underrated mid lane pick in this patch, it's going to be Cho'Gath with the Glacial Augment setup, but it's not so much about the Glacial Augment, it's more so the fact that Cho'Gath is really good into a lot of assassin mid lane picks, and we're seeing a ton of them in 10.1. So if I just run down the most picked mid laners in this patch, you got Zed, Yasuo, Diana, Katarina, Akali, Kassadin, Fizz, so 7 out of the 10 most picked mid lane champions are like melee assassin picks in this patch, and the Cho'Gath there does great into those champions. The silence is really good for just beating those champions in the laning phase. He's got point and click burst damage pretty much, as long as you can consistently hit your Q in the laning phase with Cho'Gath. And by going for this Glacial Augment setup, by getting Twin Shadows and GLP, it allows you to very easily line up that Q, and if you do so, you're just gonna be able to pretty much one rotation these squishy assassin champions throughout the game. The most sleeper OP AD carry for 10.1 is Twitch. As long as you can just ban out something like the Caitlyn or the Misfortune in 10.1, get rid of those stronger early game AD carries, then Twitch can do really well into a lot of the most picked other ADs. You got Kai'Sa and Jhin right now, 2 of the 3 most picked AD carries for 10.1. You also got Vayne being played quite a bit right now. You still got Ezreal being played a pretty substantial amount for this patch. So Twitch can actually have a surprisingly strong laning phase into those champions. Once you get your first item, once you get Blade the Ruined King, your surprise factor there, your all-in potential once you hit the level 6, once you get your 1 item spike is really strong. And just the fact that you don't see this champion being played a ton anymore, like players are just gonna forget how to play against it. The stealth you have with your Q there is so strong for solo queue. It allows you to make roam plays. He's one of the only AD carries in the game that can actually make really successful roam plays. If he gets a snowball going, he can also just come back to lane with his stealth, look to surprise the opponent, and get a ton of kills from that in the laning phase as well. So another champion that can do really well with Omnistone in this patch that's underrated is Pantheon top. Pantheon's a champion that in the past has utilized almost every single keystone in the game. We've seen Pantheon players go press the attack, we've seen them go conquer, we've seen Hail of Blades like on support Pantheon a little bit, Aftershock Pantheon, even like Airy and Comet are viable options on him as well. So the fact that this champion can proc like almost every single keystone in the game, and if you are in a matchup to where you can play aggressive, to where you can bully the enemy top laner, Omnistone is going to be great on Pantheon because you're just going to be able to cycle through all those keystones and get a ton of benefits from this rune. And then similar to Pantheon, Camille top is also another one who can do great with Omnistone in 10.1. She's also another champion that in the past has almost run like every single keystone in the game. In metas, we've seen Comet Camille top, we've seen Fleet Footwork on her, press the attack, conquer. She can utilize like almost every keystone in the game, which does make this rune very underrated on her. I had Camille on my list of just the best champions to one trick up in the top lane for the start of season 10 because the champion is just so strong right now in my opinion, but she's never picked a lot, she's never banned a lot either. You're gonna be able to play her in almost every single game. So if you want to learn Camille right now, if you want to just play this champion a lot, then I think right now in this meta, it's one of the best times to do so. And then to round out the video for a very sleeper OP jungle pick, it's going to be Reksai. So with the meta we're in for the jungle, with early game being very important, with ganking a lot in the early game being pretty important right now, Reksai is a great jungle pick. She does have the ability to gank a lot early. Her unique gank paths make her even stronger if you can utilize those well in the early game too, because you can come in and you can gank from angles that people just aren't going to be expecting, which are going to make your ganks that much more potent. Her flash Burrow is probably the strongest, or it's one of the strongest gank tools in the early game as well. It pretty much guarantees that you burn the enemy flash, and then once you have their flash down, you can just repeat gank as well, pick up a very free kill. So I think Reksai right now, if you can play her well, if you can control the early game, if you can get ahead in the early game, then she can be a very deadly jungle pick. Alright, so that is going to round out the video, guys. Those are 10 of the most underrated champions, runes, or build setups right now for 10.1 that if you aren't using already, you should definitely look into because they are very sleeper OP. With that being said though, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you've yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.